Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, May 3rd, 2021. My name is Mike Langford, and welcome back to another episode of DearBands Live, the podcast that explores the paths and stories of career-minded artists and music industry professionals. My guest tonight, founding member of alternative metal band Gemini Syndrome. His current group, hard rock band September Mourning, has kept busy during the last year of lockdowns, recently releasing their single, Kill This Love. They've also announced a string of U.S. festival dates later this year, including Rebel Rock in Orlando, Florida, and Inkcarceration in his home state of Ohio. In his own words, grew up on the west side of Cincinnati and moved to the west side of the continent. Please welcome my guest tonight, songwriter, all-star tour driver, and my favorite 8-string guitarist, Rich Juzwick. Rich, how's it going? I got him muted. I blew this again. Rich, how's it going?
That was an intro.
I tried my best.
I didn't know I was that important. Man,
you are important.
That's a lot of stuff. Thanks for having me. Fun.
Thanks for joining me. Just gotta get my computer out of the way here.
So I'm all-star driver.
All-star tour driver. I've heard a lot of tour van driving stories from you from the times we've toured together.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. When I was in Gemini Syndrome, I never drove. Mike did most of the driving, or almost all of it, and I think there's a few times they had me drive, and I think I drove kind of like a jerk on purpose. Because I was doing so much other work for the band, and I was like, I got to drive too. Like, you're not doing this or this or this. You should be driving. So with this band, I took on that role. So I drive a lot, and I've been able to park with the trailer in some pretty precarious situations. I mean,
that is a skill.
Yeah,
the van and trailer, because I find there's like a moment a driver, if something clicks where they get it, and it's like they can get that trailer anywhere they need to get it.
Yeah. I one time parked. This was across the street from the Rialto in Tucson. This is when we did a show with Marilyn Manson. I couldn't find any parking that was long enough for the van and the trailer, but I found this one spot that was like on a corner. And there was a spot here and a spot here. I was able to jackknife the trailer and park it like two separate vehicles around the corner.
And it was cool.
Yeah. Like I backed it up, and then between inching it around, was able to like literally park it trailer to van and take up two spots around a corner.
And that's totally cool. You got it done.
Yeah.
See, Jeremy's out here. Rich in the Sprinter van trailer parking in the craziest spots. Yeah, again, when you're on tour, not to like dig into this too much, but when you're on tour, it's like van and trailer can be awesome in some ways and a complete nightmare in other ways.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, like having a van in the trailer as opposed to an RV or a Sprinter or anything bigger, it's easier to maneuver because it's a van.
Yeah.
But if you're in a van, you can't stand up. There's a lot less room. So there's a give and take to everything, So,
All right, we can talk more about vehicles later, but I just remember like standing outside and also there are issues with vehicles as well. That's another thing that people don't realize sometimes. It's like, the reliability of our vehicles. Like when we're trying to tour, because like if you have a small hiccup, it can really snowball into a bigger problem. And you're trying to chase a tour because like 2 or 3 days away, you can be like 18 hours away from where you need to be.
Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as, we drive gasoline vehicles all the time. Don't normally drive diesel, but then picking up a diesel Sprinter and then having to learn all the little things that you didn't ever pay attention to are happening, and they cost $2,500 per fix, on a diesel vehicle. So, because I mean, many people know the saga of the Sprinter and different things that we had happen, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's a piece of crap. You should have never gotten a Sprinter." It's like, it's not because it's a piece of crap. It's just because it's it's a different type of technology that I'm not used to, and I didn't know how to plan ahead for as much. And it's like having a plasma TV versus a regular TV. It's more expensive, so to fix it, it's a lot more expensive too. So you're paying to play. If you obviously wanted all these nice things about this. Well, you're paying for it.
There's a trade. There's a trade and a balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, without talking about vehicles for the next hour and a half. How you been? What you been up to?
I've been working at a drive-through. People know my stories of people at the drive-through.
Oh,
So that's
yes.
what, yeah, I've been doing that since October. I mean, all last year I was still, picking away at band stuff. Obviously, it didn't have to go as fast or didn't take up as much time as it used to. But last October, this job that I used to work at when I was in college called me up and was like, "We can't get people to work here. Can you help? We know that you're not traveling and you're in town." I was like, "Sure." So I started helping out up there, and I made really good money for what it was. And that's been weirdly my life is going like in full circle and doing something like that, something I did when I was in college, like that. I've seen so many people that I haven't seen in years just come through like, "What are you doing here?" And that's that's what I've been doing. But we're gearing up for more, I guess, real life, because the real life is music. That's what I've been doing for over a decade, and we're slowly getting into gear with that. Emily's actually flying here to Cincinnati on May 12th, and we're supposed to go work on some new music. And then I think, yeah, I just got a phone call with her and the director, Josh West, and we're going to film a music video here in Cincinnati in May 22nd, 23rd. And yeah, it's getting back in gear with all that stuff.
I want to ask, like, last year, was there a time when you felt like touring was going to slow down? Like, was there a moment of clarity, or just like, I don't think we're doing much this year?
I mean, right after we did one like 2-week run last year in February, and right after that finished, and everyone kept talking about COVID and making the Corona beer jokes, I was like, something's gonna happen. And then then the first quarantines and lockdowns happened, and I was like, oh, well, I don't think I'm going to be touring this year. And I would talk to different people, and they would always say, like, if this happened in March, they'd be like, "I'm sure by June it'll be straightened out." And then they kept pushing it back, and I honestly, by April, seeing how intense everything was like, even my booking agent, he's like, "Oh, I talked to this festival, they're pushing back 3 months." I was like, "Do you want to start figuring out routing dates?" I was like, "What's the point?" I was like, "Oh," I said, "Do not waste your time." I was like, it's not going to get solved that fast. And I was like, I'm not even paying that much attention to the science and the statistics. It's just like, I'm just watching human nature and just seeing how things play out. And I was just like, we'll be lucky if we tour by the winter. And I doubt that's even going to happen.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, I was right. And,
it's hard because people were trying to place their chips, as you're saying, like a few months out, hopefully things would turn around. I remember hearing some of the booking agents, they rerouted, like they rebooked the tours once.
Yeah.
And then that was it. They're just like, we're not picking up the phones or sending any emails until we know for sure things are kind of happening again. And, it's a lot of mid-level artists, like they were the first to kind of like, I think, open the gates up as far as like this summer and the fall. Saying we're comfortable, because I'm always like waiting for, trying to think of a way to word it. Just like what the bigger artists, like A-list artists, the ones that used to have like the arena shows and like those big.
But they're the biggest risk because there's the most amount of people in one room.
Yeah, so it's like I was waiting to see like what is their plan, but also I'd heard that Live Nation had added a clause like they're not advancing any of the money for those shows now. Like they're not. So the idea when there's some hard costs, it's like the bands or the artists have to kind of shoulder those and figure it out. So, so there's an upside to being a mid-level artist or an emerging artist, but and I'm really not seeing any of the bigger acts. Because also too, you think about the crews and stuff. You might have a band with 5 people in it, 4 or 5 people in it, but there might be like 7 people that also tour with that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how things go down. I hope everyone's safe and, takes care of themselves, but it's just, I still think fingers are crossed for this summer. To get some of those festivals going.
I mean, as of right now, everything that we had in August into the fall has not changed, and there is no intention of it changing. Some of the stuff that was in June and July did move back, but that moved back a few months ago. And but yeah, I mean, like we've got I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Metal in the Mountains in Pipestone, West Virginia. Then we've got Inkcarceration. Then we got Rebel Rock. And that's all between August, September. And then also Arctic Comic Con in Anchorage, Alaska. That's supposed to be Halloween weekend. So it's none of that's been changed for me. So
okay, two questions. How are you getting to Alaska?
We're not driving. I'm telling you that. It's believe me, from the tour manager part of my brain, I looked at a map and I just wanted to see how many hours it was and what the terrain was. And I did it, and I was like, there's no way. I was like that. I was like, if I was in a car, sure, and wanted to take a long road trip, but the idea of taking the trailer and no way, and we always have like, program lights and video and all that. So for me, it was like trying to think about how to coordinate that, as a fly date. I was like, man, we're not gonna be able to give the show that we normally give, but we can give a version of it. But if I try to do literally the same show, it's gonna be so hard to figure out. So maybe if I did drive up there, no. So I was gonna say, to anyone that comes to see us at Arctic Comic Con at Anchorage, it's gonna be a cool show. It won't be our U.S. show.
Slightly different show.
Yeah, but that's just like going to Europe. You can't have it unless we're like arena band. You're not gonna be able to have the exact same show everywhere you go.
I think it's understandable because, again, you do have to kind of fly into those because that's far. But also like some larger acts have like a full second backline just sitting in Europe.
Yeah.
It's just sitting in storage somewhere, like everything they need to go and use it for 6 weeks of the year.
Just eating up money. Just it's funny. A friend of mine, he lived in Hollywood, and he's always done different things with music business. His garage, he was storing Sepultura's US rig from the 90s. And this at this point, this is like 10 years ago. He's like showing me bass cabs and like a wardrobe case and this other stuff. He's like, this is all Sepultura's, and they pay me every month to store it. They haven't come over here in a while to use it. And some of this gear is so old, I don't understand why, they wouldn't just sell it. But they're spending more money on me in my garage. But whatever, Yeah, I don't want to do things like that.
No, it's just some of these logistics that fans of the bands don't even consider.
Yeah,
because it
I
is.
mean,
good.
Yeah, I was saying, but I mean, even me, like, I moved to LA in 2006 and did music stuff and got going. But 3 years ago, or almost 3.5 years ago, I brought all my stuff back to Ohio because I was just like, I'm on tour so much. It's so stupid for me to pay rent. Like, I'm on tour for 6 weeks, but I'm paying close to $1,500 a month for something I'm not even
using. Yeah.
And then when I come back, I got to go pay $185 a month for a trailer to sit in storage because I don't have a driveway.
There's nowhere to put it.
Yeah, and then there's all these logistical things that just equal wasting a lot of money, and then paying for rehearsal spaces. It's like having rehearsal spaces just like having an apartment. You got to pay first and last month. So now not only am I paying $1,500 for rent, I'm paying probably $1,000 or $800 for a rehearsal space that I'm not using because I'm on tour. Then someone could say, well, then why don't you use an hourly place? Well, because using an hourly room for a week is the same as paying for a month. So that's why I was just like, I'm done with it. I lived in LA. I experienced a lot, and it was cool. I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't go there. But I brought all my stuff back to Ohio, and it's cheaper for me to fly in band members and rehearse in the garage. And then just logistically, most tours start in the Eastern and Central time zones. I don't have to deadhead it from California to find my way to the Midwest.
Yeah, to get back there. No, these are real things. Like the amount of musicians that move to bigger cities, they find some success, and then they realize, like, wait a second, I can cut my overhead costs a lot Cause like
Yeah.
you don't, it's one thing to be somewhere where like you can be accessible. And I think
Yeah.
that's important. But even here in Toronto, it's like, you know, bands move here and they move to Montreal or, you know, but like once they kind of find their footing, moving even
Yeah.
an hour outside the city can cut your overhead by like 70%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's you know, you have to get in the game, you know, you have to network and meet people, and you know, everything is like, it's like a, you know, I guess it's almost like an ant farm. You have all these little moving people and pieces that are working together to make what it happen, whether it's making a movie or writing a song, whatever, you know. So we're just having the band and playing music together. Like, you know, there's 5 people in a band. You got to find the right 5 people. So you got to have your odds go up higher by going to a place
Yeah.
that there's other like-minded people that have that motivation. Like me living in Cincinnati, I tried, you know, I'm not saying I never met musicians and I never met people that were decent players, but that intangibleness of of the package of a person, you know, that has the motivation, has the work ethic, has, you know, all those things, and finding 4 or 5 of them. You
In
know,
your, yeah.
yeah. Cincinnati is not the place for that. I'm not saying bands can't start here, but for the places I went and the people that I knew, there was no way I was ever gonna really make something work.
No, you're right. Like it is like lower odds that like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying lower, but it's like the idea of your hometown where you're going to find the group, have the chemistry, everyone's on board and wants to, you know,
Yeah.
wants to go and do that. But like you do increase the odds if you know, if it's like, if you want to get in shape, it's like, well, you're probably going to meet like-minded people if you go to a gym. You know, if
Yeah.
you like to read, you probably meet like-minded people if you go to a bookstore, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's just like there is some upsides to the larger cities, and you find some of these musician circles or these creative circles where it's like
Yeah.
everyone has an idea and going, no, I want to do this bad enough that I'm willing to make sacrifices to try to do
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah. Everything's relative. That's the thing to realize. Is like, you know, I hear people talk about different things, and they always try to talk kind of in absolutes, like this is right and that's wrong. Like this is the right version, that's the wrong version of it.
yeah,
Like it all depends on these categories of circumstances. You know, in this situation, this is correct. In this situation, this is correct. You know, it's relative to all those details. I mean, it's even relative to who you are as a human being and where your upbringing. You know, just growing up in a farmland versus growing up in a city, you have different experiences of things. So your how much you understand about other things is affected, and how you relate to other people, and how, you know, that's why it's complicated, and that's why that even with there's no set way to do anything right and have success, especially in music. You know, you have to be able to. I call it. It's just the self-realization. What are you good at? What are you not good at? And be real about it. Just be real about it. If you like, it's like someone, if they want to try to start a band and they're a horrible singer. If you're a horrible singer, then be real about it with yourself, because the sooner you're real about it, you'll focus on finding a good singer. But if you're not real about it, you're just gonna be wasting your time. It's okay to not be great at certain things.
No, it is difficult to like be real, as you're saying, like be realistic about our abilities and like what we're looking to do. And, you know, it's important to kind of have that talk with yourself. But at the same time, like I can't tell somebody don't do music because like, I don't think you're good enough to do it. Cause like, what do I know at the end of the day? But when you're in music,
there's different versions of good though. I mean, look at someone like Rob Zombie. He doesn't sing. You know what I mean? Like, but he figured out a way to be good. So
where I was going to go with that, it's like after long enough in music industry or any industry, it's like you start to notice like what is the important pieces here that, and you mentioned Rob Zombie. It's like you can look at that and go, okay, there's some star power here. There's a vision here. There's a sound here. There's a market for what they're trying to do. So it's that idea, you know, if you judge a fish against, you know, climbing a tree, it's probably not going to do very well. But if it knows what what the artist's market is, and that's always my thing. It's like before I even really dig too much into the talent part, it's like what is what are you aiming for? What are you trying to do? Because I need to know like what we're trying to mark against versus just because, like, you know, you're right. It's like, you know, singers, guitar players, drummers. It's like lots of people that are great, There's lots of people that are not so great, but like, what are you trying to do with it? Because once we know that, we can figure out, okay, what's the market and the niche we're trying to match up against. Because there's so many, and you'd probably agree, it's like there's so many things, there's so many factors to what something can be, like how something can be successful. You know, and it's like you've probably heard it when someone's just like, oh, this band's not very good. Like, I'm surprised that they're doing this well. It's like, well, they work really hard. The live show's good, pictures look good, and they're good people. So,
and you know, obviously, there's always opinions on what's good. That's why people have favorite bands and don't like other bands. But I try to explain to people, it's kind of go, there's an ass for every seat. Like, you know, it's just because it's like saying, like, just because you don't like pickup trucks, there's obviously people out there that like pickup trucks.
Yeah.
So just because you don't like a pickup truck, you
doesn't
can't
mean
be
they suck.
Yeah. Well, you can't be so narrow-minded to just think universal. You just have to be like, I don't like trucks. All the reasons why people like trucks, I don't like them. But okay, I get it. If you lived here and did this and blah blah blah, that's why you would like a truck. Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. It's like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I guess look at the bigger picture of everything and not make it just about you. You know.
No, it's like, just to, you know, expand that just a little bit more. Like when I'm of the thought, you know, your 1,000 core fans. You know, if you can have your 1,000 core fans and they can, you know, invest and vote with their dollars, $100 a year, it's really easy math to put some money together for a band to do something. And I think that's a good goal for success. And when we think about the internet and stuff these days, when bands like are not able to grow, not able to find their fan base, I'm just like, you know, I think there's like 3.5 or 4 billion people with internet access.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you can't reach enough of them, you know, outside of friends and family and stuff to build your audience.
Yeah. Well, that's another problem too, I think, is like, you know, obviously having diverse influences and diverse things that you like is ideal. But for you, because your band is a business, you know, find the people. It's like if you had a restaurant, you need to find, if you had a Chinese restaurant, you need to find people that like Chinese food. You know, you being realistic about what you're creating and who you're getting it to, not and what other bands that are understanding literal versus principle. You know, understanding the principle of 10 different styles of bands and seeing what they all do principally the same, but understanding how literally they do it different ways because they're in different styles of bands. And for bands to not, I've seen it before, or I've seen a band, I've been in bands like this before, where literally they take 10 different bands that stylistically are completely different and go, well, they're doing that, and they chase after that, and well, they're doing, like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you trying to act like Slipknot, but then trying to act like Rage Against the Machine, that doesn't make any sense. Like, because those are two different styles of presentation, music, all of that. So, you know, don't distract yourself with those literal things. Like, just, you know, focus on what you've got and be realistic about that, and, you know, do it.
Yeah, I agree with bands chasing after too many, you know, chasing too many foxes.
Because they're all successful. So if I chase all that, then I'll be successful too. It's like, it's relative.
Yeah, and I'm of the thought, it's like the more you can kind of narrow down what you're trying to do, it's like when you get success, like when you find more success, then you can start branching out a little bit. That's why I think that's the value of an album too. The idea, if you have 10 or 12 songs, it's like you can make 3/4 of that record the stuff your fan base is going to like, and then you can kind of branch out a little bit and try some other stuff, but not abandon the core and what they like.
Yeah. And then find out that people weren't super into it, and then maybe even you realize that you weren't super into it. Now that you had, you know, like, that was like a phase when you're like, you started listening to this one style of music and you wanted to write a song like that, and now you're looking back on it like, oh yeah, I don't really care about that anymore. Let's go back to what I've been doing. You know,
I'm thinking of, there's one of my favorite bands that was kind of emerging in Toronto, Montreal, but 10 years ago, but they were this really high energy, like electro rock band. And, it was at like the end of the dubstep wave.
Yeah.
And like, they ended up like going way too full into that, and it just killed the band. Because everything that was cool about the band got kind of removed and replaced with the dubstep stuff. And even seeing them live, so I saw them live a few times, and like watching them on the stage, I'm like, I don't think anyone in the band wants to do this right now. but like the producer and like the label, everyone's like, yeah, let's do this. It'll be big. But it was already at the end of the wave, especially if you're in Canada too, if anyone's listening, Canada. We're usually behind when it comes to trends. So like chasing a US trend or even a European trend, it's like, just don't do it. Like either you're ahead of the curve or don't even bother getting into that.
Yeah.
Anyways, we could probably chat about that. Some of these, the DNA of successful bands for a while. But as far as you getting into music, and is guitar your first instrument, or like how did you kind of get started?
Guitar, yeah. I mean, for real, yeah. It was my first instrument. It's funny. Like I think about the past, and I kind of forget, or I've forgotten how much I was already kind of in music. Like when I was in grade school, I was in choir and I sang at church. I totally forgot about that. I mean, I totally forgot that I used to be able to, I totally forgot that I actually could sing until my voice changed. So like, but I got my first guitar when I was 13 and I bought it with Christmas money. Like my birthday is January 12th, so it's basically 3 weeks after Christmas.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time I would get Christmas and birthday money all at the same time.
The slashy gift.
Yeah. So I took all the cash and I bought my first acoustic guitar, and it started then when I was 13. And I mean, I played in a band in high school. I was in marching band and concert band for 2 years in high school. And then I kind of like hit a drought. Like I went to college, couldn't find people to play with. So I kind of got into that mode of sometimes you can't force things. Sometimes you just got to let fate kind of do its thing, and maybe I'm not ready. So I did that. And then all of a sudden I realized, I was like, wow, a couple years have gone by. I better just shake it up. So I moved to LA. And I moved to LA when I was 26 and went to Musicians Institute. I only did like a 6-month program there. It was like my legit reason to have family help me move to California. I was like, I'm going to school. I'm not going there to party. And it worked because like I went there and went there for 6 months, got good grades, recorded a lot of, I'm not to say all, but I'd say at least half of what ended up becoming Gemini Syndrome, first songs, I wrote the instrumentals in that first year, living in Hollywood, going to MI. I was an intern at a record label, and I was a runner in an R&B studio. I met like Babyface and Mary J. Blige and Chris Brown, Jennifer Hudson, all these people, and I was doing that, and then I started working for Live Nation, and I was a runner for that stuff, and then I was setting up dressing rooms. So I was just, at that time, everything about me was about learning as much as I could about everything band related. So I was writing songs, I was trying to find people to play with, but I was working production, going, well, if I'm at the Hollywood Palladium, how does the show run? Why is, because this is where you're trying to get the level this big. And I just did all that for a couple of years, and then I came up with the Gemini Syndrome idea, started putting ads out, met people, and all of a sudden, and that's why Gemini Syndrome happened so quick, was because I had a plan and I had so much back material. Like the album was recorded, the first version of the album, not the Warner Brothers version. But that album was recorded before we were even actually a real band. I just had belief in the music that I'd written and was tracking it for real. And that's how I got started in the music industry, was from the very bottom, working behind the scenes.
There's a lot of value to knowing the different areas. Like when you mentioned, working with Live Nation, like being able to be at the shows and like poke around a little bit to see how things actually run.
Yeah.
That's what kind of got me back into playing, because I was on the studio side for such a long time. And then a band called Age of Days, they needed a drummer, and worked on a couple of the records, and they were doing a festival that Korn was headlining. And part of me was like, I really want to see what's going on, because when you're in the band, you have access to the stage. And it's like, I wanted to see how they're running stuff. And it's like their whole light show, they had 4 Mac Pros, like in tour cases and stuff like that. I'm just like, okay, like this is all synced. Like everything's all synced, and that's how they're running stuff. And just having access to the behind the scenes stuff if you're a musician. And so like when bands get on some of these bigger bills, it's like, go do some homework. Like, go do some reconnaissance to figure out how things are actually running. Like, don't just go there and be like, yeah, free beers and hang out and like learn nothing.
Get kicked off the tour. Or have people say, we're never going to have them on a run this big ever again. Like, because they don't understand.
They're not ready yet.
Protocol. Yeah, general protocol and etiquette.
Yeah, there's so much to learn to see how these shows run, and like when you see bands that get it and that don't get it. And like I half joke about big gigs where it's like a band gets a big gig and all they want to do is just, especially in modern times, it's like they just want to talk about it on Facebook the next day and how awesome everything was. And it's just like, no, like use that as leverage. Like go learn things, learn how they function.
Well, and it's funny because I think most people's perception is like, oh, you're in a band. And especially if it's a band that's doing well, and playing larger shows and playing with larger bands, it's just like, you just got to be great. You just got to be charismatic and go party, and then everybody else will just do everything else for you. That's why there's crew, and stuff like that. And I'm just like, and they think that, and obviously because there's tons of stories about bands like that, like say like a Guns N' Roses or like they acted a Motley Crue. I mean, look at the Dirt. They acted like this. Look how successful they still were. It's like, yeah, but again, relativity. Look at the time and place of the industry, of music, of the world, and it was just a lucky mix of details that worked out for them. But the reality is I see more often that 99% of the time the music artists that are succeeding are a combination of a sports team mentality and a real business, for instance, a friend of mine was guitar teching for I Prevail, and he said they're the most competitive band he's ever seen. He's like, all they do is work, all they do is stay on top of their game and make sure that they're just doing it, just like if you run a football team, you work out, you scrimmage, and he's like, there's a reason why they're going so well. I was like, yeah, and that's the trend I noticed with most bands is or not most, but all super successful bands is that they, like I said, are a combination of like being a team, and having the quarterback and having, the running back and all that stuff, and everyone knowing their role and working hard as one unit, and realizing the seriousness of like they're trying to make a living off of this. So, being like just that dumb band that just like, dude, where's my case of beer? And like somebody else will take care of that. I'll sleep until 4. Like I'm not saying that there aren't successful bands that do that. There are, but it's dumb luck that they're succeeding. They're just lucky that they have certain people around them that make it work for them.
No,
that's not the goal, to try to be like that.
No, and that's the thing. Like I love the idea, the sports analogy for it, because like it really is a team thing. And it's like, and you're saying it's like you're right with like the roles. It's like there's lots of roles in a band to make sure things can run smoothly. And one of my things is always just like not making things more difficult than they already are. Because things, especially bands on tour, any relationship, it's like, it's really easy to make things difficult. It's really easy to just, add a bit of weight to what you're trying to actually do in the first place. But kind of expand on it. It's like talking about, you mentioned I Prevail. It's like, and everyone's working towards, and everyone's looking at the big picture. I think that's a huge advantage that bands have over solo artists. But because if you've got 5 people in a band, and if everyone's trying to work like every single day, putting some hours into, the band being a success, you have just more hours in a day than a solo artist does. But then we could argue like, well, why are some solo artists like way bigger than bands? Because we can name tons of solo artists that are huge, but they eventually cross the threshold where they have a team behind them. So they go from like 1 to maybe 2 or 3 to like 20 people behind them.
Yeah.
And how much harder they had to work.
Yeah. Well, part of it's just focus though too, because if you're a solo artist, you know what you want. You know what you're writing. You know, it's concise. There's not too many cooks in the kitchen. You don't have differing opinions. So in the initial part, yeah, like you can stay completely focused, and since the accountability is all on you. You know what I mean? It's not like you're in a band and you're sitting there going like, oh, I'm killing myself, but so and so's only doing so much, and then that just creates the typical inner band turmoils. You know, so it's like, yeah, you know, it makes total sense that a solo artist initially would be a little more, I guess, more concise, and they're starting up. But then again, because everything's relative, obviously, when things get to a certain point, you have to have a team behind you. You can't just be by yourself because there's just too many balls to juggle, and the balls are huge. You know, huge balls.
No, it is, because the more things are going in the right direction, the more work there is.
Yeah.
You know, even to go back, you're talking about the bands that have success and stuff. It's like things can get really busy, I think, you know, in brackets, in a worse way really quickly, because it's like, you know, you want to go and do the radio interview, but then you got to be there at 6:30 in the morning. And, you know, it's like there's just enough time to get there if you leave the show and drive directly there, and you need to be a little bit chipper in the morning and look half presentable. And it's like, these are the things that we didn't know that we signed up for. But there's a lot of bands that just, they couldn't do that. They would be like, you know what, this isn't what I want to do. Like, I kind of want to just play a local in my hometown like once every 3 months, and like, is that cool? But
I like playing, but I don't want the responsibility of all this stuff. Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Joining September Mourning. How'd that come about? How was the transition there?
It was kind of, okay. So I met Emily in 2012, right when I went to Vegas to record the Gemini Syndrome album with Kevin Churko. We had started talking online, and I just and because we had friends in common, and I was looking for other bands in LA for the Gemini Syndrome headline shows, because the way that I had structured the headline shows at the Roxy and the Troubadour was I guess I tried to treat them like a high school show where, you know, everyone's in the same social circle, and they, you know, so everyone wants to come hang. You know, that's why. So I was looking for bands that we hadn't had on the shows yet, but were still part of our little social circle. And somebody that I knew was like, "Oh, you should check out September Mourning." And then I checked them out. I was like, "Oh yeah, that would probably be a good option someday." And then randomly, somehow, Emily and I met on Facebook and just talked, and we were just friends. And I kind of tried to mentor the band, you know. So back in 2012, I was just in Gemini Syndrome, and I was just kind of like helping her with the band. And then when I decided to leave Gemini Syndrome, she was signed to Virgin, had Andy Gould managing, and she was on the verge of launching the band. They were doing auditions with Barry Squire and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I don't want to be in this band anymore. I can probably help out more directly with you now. And now that you're signed and all this stuff, like, I could have a job. Like that was kind of like the thought process. But then she told Andy that I was definitely done with Gemini Syndrome. He's like, well, you don't really have the band members yet. Just ask him if he wants to be in the band. And I wasn't really expecting that. You know, I thought I was going to end up being some tour manager or something. Like, I thought I would just like be helping out. And so she asked me, and voila, I ended up in September Mourning, and I've been here ever since.
No, it's just the connection sometimes. You know, it's funny how things can work out. And again, just building relationships. Like, it's just, you never know. Cause like there's times too where, like, you know, say a guitar player is like, can't do a certain tour. Well, let's call Rich and see if he wants to step in and do it. You know what I mean? Like, there's things that work out that way. Visually, September Mourning, there's a lot going on there. Is that like, as far as the stage?
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. Like as far as that goes, like is that something that you thought you'd be getting into? For anyone that's just listening, like there's like wardrobe, there's visuals, there's a comic book element. Like there's a lot of layers to what September Mourning is doing.
Honestly, everything production wise in September Mourning is something I was already doing in Gemini Syndrome, or I had intended to evolve into with Gemini Syndrome. The only thing that was different was the amount of makeup and costuming. I mean, obviously, if you look at Gemini Syndrome, we weren't just wearing t-shirts and jeans. We had a specific vibe, but it was tame compared to September Mournings. So yeah, the idea of me blacking out my arms and wearing that much makeup and then wearing this like Dungeons and Dragons coat, like I didn't ever really imagine doing that. But at the same time, though, I was only like it's like living next door to it. You know what I mean? Like I was in the house next door, so moving to the house next door wasn't that much of a change. But like we had program lights, we had video. Like I said, like all the program lights, I've been doing that with Gemini Syndrome since 2010. And then the video was something I wanted to start doing, but we weren't a big enough band for us to really need it, or to really warrant it. We just it was a different thing. And since September Mourning is based on the comic book, it just made so much sense to like have video and show comic book stuff and get people to see the world and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean it's a lot. I mean, that's what I'm saying, like I know, for the amount of stuff that we have going on stage, and most people, there are headlining bands, like larger bands that have a full crew that you would assume that it takes that for us to have that show, when the reality is we have that show and it's me, Emily, two other band members, and a merch girl. Like,
just make it work.
Yeah, because I do all the work at home, and then it's literally plug and play. I have my laptop, I have MIDI triggers that change my amp settings, change my pedal settings, run the video, run all the extra synth tracks, and trigger all the lights. And I hit spacebar. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work at home, but we were able to put on a show that's literally set up by the band that looks like you'd have a full crew with LD. So, but that's something I've always done. I've always wanted to try to present the biggest show I could with whatever budget I had.
Just want to grab a quick comment here. Jeremy Isbell said, last Dead Set Run was September. Watching Rich set up production, lighting, and everything else was amazing. Mad respect for you, Rich. Great to work with. My Google review. I agree 100%.
Thank you.
Because the thing is, like, sometimes you have 15 minutes for changeover.
Yeah.
And even if you're headlining, there's still, 15, 20 minutes for changeover. There's still things that need to get finished. You have as much stuff set up as you can, and it's awesome if everything's set up and ready to go and you get up there after the band before you. But it's like there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And to know, like, the vibe that I get is a lot of the technical stuff falls on your shoulders. And like,
I mean, it didn't fall on my shoulders. I picked it up and put it there.
Well, but still, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's still there. And it's like,
yeah,
there's times I'm sure where you're just like, I hope that got fixed, or like, I hope this runs today, or like this cable was a little bit funky, this morning. And you're just, I hope it works, but it's like that on your mind plus performing.
Yeah. I mean, that, there's two things to that. Like, one, I will admit that, like, I guess living in the moment of playing the show and just enjoying that experience, I probably don't enjoy it as much as I should, because, like, literally I'm teching in my head while I play the entire time. Like, the minute, like, literally, even though I'm headbanging and doing whatever you think I'm just playing, my brain that's on autopilot. What I'm actually doing is I'm observing. I know the light triggers. I know when they're, and immediately if something's wrong with the lights and one doesn't do something it was supposed to do, I know it for a fact. Like, I know it. And I go and fix it in between songs, or point to the other guitar player and say, hey, it's on, and then since he helped set it up, he knows what to do, but I notice all of it. Like, I literally, I'm like teching on stage. So it's, I guess it's an unfortunate byproduct of trying to do so much. But then I will also compliment my band members that I've had over the years, because there's been a lot of different people in the band, that when they got in the band, I tried to explain to them, like, you're not going to just show up and play. If you're in this band, you're going to be responsible for a lot more than normal. And if you're okay with that, I'll explain it all to you. But it's going to be a lot. And pretty much everyone that's ever been in the band has always been super good and cool about, appreciating what it adds to the show and what it does for the band. And they see a photo of themselves and go, wow, I look so cool. It's like, well, because strategic lighting that we had, if we were at the mercy of a crappy club or a local LD, you would not look that good in that photo. But like, I have to compliment everyone that's ever been in the band, like, pitching in and helping. It's like, even though I'm teching in my head while it's going on, they've all been helpful in, like, actually maintaining certain things. And if I said, hey, can you fix that while we're loading in or something, they jump in and would do it, so it's like, I'm still quarterbacking everything, but I wasn't physically gonna have to be pulled in too many directions a lot of the time. So
no, it's a lot.
I have good band members.
No, it's a lot to be able to fire on all cylinders like that.
Yeah.
So again, like, it's if you're referred to as a heavy lifter, it's like when you have other people lifting as well, it does help. And especially, the idea when you're saying, you put a lot of this on your shoulders, it's like when you see that the lighting, we could do some stuff, or some video, like we could do some things. Like, I'm a big believer, if you want to be successful in music, the current music industry, just being a good musician is, like, not enough. There's so many other skill sets you need to have.
Yeah. That's like being the good musician is like being a human being and just breathing. Like, you're not thinking about it. You just breathe all day, but to succeed in life, you actually have to consciously do other things that are way more complicated.
Yeah, and just and I think too, it's like you find things that you naturally, gravitate towards. And it's like, when you're talking about the live show, it seems like that's something that you're really into. Like, you like the lights, like, as much as it's a lot of work, like you enjoy the process and you enjoy the rewards from it. When you're talking too about how it makes the pictures after, the video after, like, it sets you apart.
Yeah.
It's one thing to just have stage clothes and, like, have that kind of vibe, but lighting, it makes such a huge difference. And you watch a big show, I can't think of a big show that doesn't have wicked lights to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not an oversight.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why sometimes I would meet bands and they would talk a lot of crap. I'd be like, oh, the production, what happens just getting up there and just going for it and jamming? It's like, look, name your top 5 favorite bands of all time. All right. What size venues are they playing? All right. What's the show look like? Right. Like, you went to the show and you're like, you were floored as soon as it started. Did they just play with, like, a couple old 30-year-old par cans and just stand there? No. There was other stuff going on. And that's why that feeds into your experience of you already loved them as a band when you heard the album, and you went to the show and you loved them even more because it was a total experience. I'm just trying to give a version of that vibe with what I got to work with.
Yeah, and you can always build it up too. It can probably, like, what would you say is like the minimum for a light rig for a band?
A couple strobes and some LEDs. You don't have to have a lot. It's just being realistic about what you're trying to accomplish, and then also making sure that you don't have blind spots. Because I've seen the mistake with some bands, they'll program stuff, and they'll have way too much, and it's just like, dude, there's no way you can set that up in time. There's no way. Too many cables,
true. Yeah.
Too much crap. But also, then they tell the house LD they don't need the house lights because they have program lights.
Oh yeah.
And I'll admit that I made this mistake in the very beginning when I first started doing it. But when I first started doing it, there was no one to teach me. I literally had an idea, went on Google, found out that there was a program that I could use that was brand new, and then started using it. But the big problem was if I didn't have house lights, there were certain spots where the stage was completely black for a split second, and it was a really important part of the song where I had to move a big distance on the guitar, and I can't see anything. So that's what I'm saying. That you don't have to have a lot of stuff, but you have to be. But all these little finer points and subtle details are the things you need to keep track of, and they're actually the easiest things because they're very common. You know, it's not calculus to try to figure out that you need these things. Like, pretty much common sense. You shouldn't have a completely black stage when you're playing something hard.
It's not going to help.
You're going to have to look down at your hands, and you're not going to be able to see what fret you're on.
I would say to that too. Strobe lights. I remember the first time playing when like strobes were going.
Yeah.
And when you're a drummer, it's like everything looks really weird because you're just getting these frames of your arms doing stuff, and you're like, this is weird. I can only imagine what that feels like as a guitar player. If you got to play something, or maybe just time it so you're not too much going on. But
the main trick with that is like, don't aim the strobes in your eyesight. Like having a strobe in front of you and have it blasting you in the front of the face, even if you're not looking at it directly, but having like that, it's going to mess you up. But having stuff off to the side peripherally, it doesn't matter what's going on because it's not direct.
Same effect.
You're talking. It doesn't faze me. But also, I program the strobes at certain points where I would just be going off anyway, and my eyes would be shut, and I'd probably be headbanging as hard as possible. Because that's the psychology of when the things would kick in. So there, I've never really gotten messed up with strobes. It's only the few times when, like, for some reason, it was directly at me, and then it made me motion sickness for like a second. Like, whoa, yeah.
I'm just talking about the lights thing. It's just like, you've got people that are running front of house, but also you've got your lighting director. So any bands that are thinking that lights are important, and as you're saying, like, a little bit can go a really long way. And as you're saying too, it's like, be realistic about how much time you have to set things up. Because I would say too, like, watching some bands try to get their in-ear rigs going. And I'm just like, I don't know if you need this. Like, it's one thing where I think if you have a simple thing for your vocalist to get, like, if they need their in-ears, because like that can be a huge help to have your in-ears and not rely on monitors and keep your stage volume where you need it. But just like, even learning about like how many cables, how much stuff can you actually plug in with a lighting rig, and then imagine you've got inner rigs and like even that's not condensed in a way where it's really easy for everybody, because it really, as you're saying before, it should be just plug and play. And if it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I've met the guys that literally like, I watched the something of this audio engineer and blah blah blah. And this is how he does it, and like blah blah blah. And that's how this band does it. No. Like they're so confident that this ridiculous setup is the setup it should be, and I'm like, again, everything is relative. What year was this process start? Okay, we have different technology now that makes things easier. So starting off with that version, dumb. look at the size of that band and how many crew members they've got. The size of the venues, how much time they've got. They load at 7 a.m. They don't load in at 3 p.m.
Yeah, they had 6 hours.
Yeah, and 6 hours and 10 people with 500 square feet of space to do things. That's why a rig like that doesn't seem ridiculous. But you trying to say that because that you learned all this stuff and you're trying to do that on a 250 capacity club floor, loading at 3 o'clock with a 15-minute changeover, with just your band members to help you. Why didn't it work? I don't know.
Yeah. No, we've seen it, and again, I don't want to see anybody fail. But like but then I'm going somewhere that I don't want to see anybody fail, but sometimes you just want to see somebody learn. You want to see them learn, and I'm a firm believer. It's not what you say; it's who says it. And sometimes it just needs to come from the top down, especially with some of these tours where they're just like, "Hey, we need to solve this because like this is insane what you're trying to do on this tour for what realistically for what we're trying to do here, be it too big or too small or whatever the rig is." But again, it can make a huge difference with the show. But as you're saying, like when you have a good idea, but not good execution for it.
Yeah, a completely unrelated thing to this. This has nothing to do with production or any rigs, but about the realisticness for changeovers. Is the drummer that takes his cymbals off his cymbal stands?
Oh no!
We're done playing. Woo! Drummer stands up. And you're like,
"What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Please tell me what you're doing.
Yeah. I've witnessed that probably a good dozen times, and don't be that guy.
No,
I'm saying that's a very simplified version of the same distortion of relativity of everything that's going on. Like, get your stuff off the stage.
When you see that, though, and we are picking on drummers for a second. I'm a drummer, so I could say certain things. When we see a drummer doing that on a decent bill, it tells me a lot about where you are mentally as a musician, because like there's no reason to take your cymbal off a stand when you know the cymbal and stand are coming off the stage. Get your stuff off the stage. If you're sharing a kit, that's different because you're going to be doing that. But it's like, yeah, no, like when people start taking weird stuff, even with maybe cover yours for a second. I don't think you're in this group, but like with guitar players stuff too. One of the genius things I saw with the band was they just had like a milk crate, and all their cables when they were done unplugged, they go in the crate. So there's no people wrapping up cable, like because it takes a second to do that, and it's like you can do that side stage if there's 15 minutes for changeover. When a band can get all their crap off stage in like 3 minutes. And it sounds unrealistic, but like it's doable.
Yeah.
Like you can do a lot in a minute if you've got 4 or 5 people. Even if one person goes off to merch already, it's like you can get a lot done, especially with the venues too. There's usually a couple people helping get stuff off stage. And it's just like anything you can do to kind of, condense time. Because you're going to wrap your cables. That doesn't need to happen on stage. Last thing I'll say too, well, you can probably add more to this if you want to dig in with things that we see live, but with people that are playing the big gig, and after they're done and their friends or family come up to the front of the stage and it's all handshakes and high fives, or there's the talk at the front of the stage about the show. It's like, get your crap off the stage. You're still at work right now.
Yeah. I totally agree with everything you said about the cables and all that stuff. I'll admit something that I do that's like a workaround. Because since I have so much going on up there with cabling between guitars and lights and everything, it's very easy to get things lost.
Yeah.
So I can't really explain how I came to do it, but it's just like a workaround of. I'll admit that I technically a lot of the time do cables or do things like that. But I'm not there. Like let's say my pedal board. I don't want it to get all messed up with all the light stuff. It's taking me so much time to figure out this in the dark off stage. So I literally get everything to a certain point, and then get like my pedal board to a spot on the stage where I know for a fact I'm in nobody's way for changeover.
Right.
And then I'm in that one little section. And then I'll wind up that and get it neat and clean off to the side in a literally a spot that I know I'm not holding up changeover. Because at that point, everything that's major is off the stage. Everything that's in the way of the next band is off the stage. And I'm just trying to like do that 5% before I make it. Because that 5% that I'm doing right there in the corner out of the way, it's saving me 25% if I just yanked it.
Yeah, no, and I
so I know that literally I fit that definition of, dude, what are you doing on that? But,
because you have a plan.
And I'm aware of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I didn't just like leave my pedal board where the next guitar player's going to put his board, and then just stand there, and he's like holding it like, what do I do? Like, I can't do anything because you're in the way. I'm very aware of not being in the way and not slowing down the process.
Yeah, no, that's the mindfulness of like when you're done your set, your time on stage is kind of done. So the idea, you know, mentioning, you know, putting things in certain places, because there's times when like we're packing things up and it's like they don't like my in-ears rig. It's like that's the one thing that like things can't get screwed up, things can't get broken. So I don't trust anyone to touch that. So the amount of times I've been sitting on stage still like wrapping that cable and stuff up, and like my kit's already gone because like bandmates, whoever, like everyone's already grabbed pieces and moved it, because it takes me a minute to do that, because like those cables can't get broken, things can't happen from somebody else from that. So I get that, but also it's the mindfulness that you're talking about of like you are out of the way for the next band. So you know, you are not part of the group where you're just you see the guitar player on stage and they still got their guitar slung on them and they're like wrapping up one cable on stage and chatting with their friend and still having their beer, and you're just like, you're done.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've had the same issue with my rack where it's like I've got so many, it's not just in-ears, it's got the laptop and all these things.
Yeah.
It's like I can't get it off stage unless I have the lids on. And most people, it's a no-no to waste time putting lids on a rack. But again, I thought about all that. So my rack is in a certain place where if I know everything's off stage, me putting the lids on, I'm not in anyone's way. And by the time I have to roll it around through stage, a majority of all this other stuff has already happened. So I'm not crisscrossing and getting in the way while they're trying to place whatever's going on. Because I've thought about it all ahead of time, you know. Or most of the time I just try to make sure the rack's not on stage. It doesn't matter.
No, you can tell people who kind of get it and are mindful. And again, like one of the things too with touring, when something's broken or goes missing, you might not have time to replace it. So like you do need to be careful with stuff. And again, I was talking about the crate and the cables, the type of band that they were. It was just easy for them to do that. And I think there's a lot of rock bands like you know, bare bones 4-piece rock bands that can get away with something like that.
On the OTEP tour, Dollskin was doing that.
That's the band.
Because okay, so their first tour ever was at OTEP run. So the first week of shows, they weren't ready to handle changeovers.
Learned a lot. Yeah.
Well, they did. They weren't ready to handle the changeovers, and things we were the band on after them. So like, you know, it always turned into shows running 20 minutes behind or 15 minutes behind, and not because of them, but because the domino effect of things. And then they added their time. So like after a week, they finally realized like, whatever, like just unplug everything and throw it. And
just find a way to speed it up.
Yeah, and then that's what they did. That was their way of not losing stuff. And you know, and after that first week of them getting stressed out because they knew that they weren't as organized, or it wasn't a reflex for them to get on off stage, you know, they figured it out. So, you know, by the end of the tour, you know, it was they were vibing like nothing like they did that first week. You know, you wouldn't have thought that was still their first tour. So. Yeah,
no, it is tough, and even when you're with different bands and you're training, you need to kind of figure out what every band's kind of show routine is.
Yeah,
you know, and you be mindful of that too, because like, there's some bands, some musicians, it's like they're oblivious to stuff like the entire tour, because they're just not paying attention to what everybody's doing. And it's like, no, you're kind of at work like 24 hours a day when you're on tour.
Yeah.
And any little moments you can get where everything is fine and there's like a break for a second, just enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's been over an hour. I got a couple more questions, a couple of things I wanted to chat about. I do want to go back to talking about the shows and festivals. You touched on it earlier just before we went live here. With the September Mourning, like with the wardrobe and stuff, you're playing some festivals this summer, and one of them is down in Florida. How hot does it get on stage for members of the band? So you're wearing black, and like there's.
I'm trying to think of a Jackie Moon analogy. Was it swamp sweaty, rainforest sweaty? Yeah, I mean, what we were talking about earlier was that like the hottest shows I can remember. The hottest show I can remember ever playing was Fort Rock, Fort Myers in April at 1:00 p.m. And that was in Gemini Syndrome, and like it's hot. I mean, if you find pictures of that, my face is beat red, and I was seeing stars by the time I got off stage. With this band, it's interesting. Everyone assumes that we're super hot because of how big those jackets are, but I don't have sleeves on, and they actually kind of breathe. So it's not having all that gear on doesn't really make it hot. What's more annoying is the fact that I'm sweating and all the makeup's melting off my arms. Um, but we're changing everything up. There's new costumes for the guys that are a little. What I would say is they're a little more like Mortal Kombat and less aggressive.
Okay.
Like if you think about like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, like how they are, I would make that kind of comparison to what they are. And we're not putting makeup on the arms anymore. We have other ways of making ourselves be uniformly black. So will that version make me hotter? We'll find out. I don't know. Will I pass out? I hope not. We'll see.
Just wondering, because it's one of those things, because like you can get pretty warm on stage, and just the idea of like, are you hydrated enough? Taking care of yourself enough? Because like some of these festivals, like you pretty much have like maybe a trailer, or your bus, your van, or like something, but it's like.
Luckily for me, even though I'm not an overweight dude, I sweat like an overweight dude. So the minute I start moving a bunch or it gets remotely warm, I'm dripping sweat. Like I'm obese, but I'm obviously not obese. So playing a show and then getting hot on stage, my body's already conditioned to be dripping wet all the time. So that doesn't really affect me that same way. And another thing is too is like I just have no problems with dumping balls of water on my head. So if I'm getting hot,
that's a good workaround.
Yeah.
So dump some water in it.
And it makes my hair look a lot cooler when I headbang too. So
it's good for the pictures.
Yeah. I'm just saying, everything's strategic. There's a reason why. There's a reason for everything. I pour water on my head. If you see those photos and you see little droplets, and you're like, man, that flood looks so cool. It's like I did it for a reason.
Photographs well.
Yeah.
Pictures always sound great. It just thinking too. Is there any like festivals you can think of where you're like, maybe it was like surreal, like earlier on where you're like, this is awesome, or like I'm stoked I'm here right now, where like finally I feel like I've kind of crossed the threshold and like I'm here, because like we work towards these goals. So is there any festivals you can think about where you're just like, I had like a moment when I was here at this show or watching this band?
Yeah, because it's tricky, because there's sometimes you can play for 100 people and it's more impactful than playing for 5,000. Obviously when you can play for 5,000 or 10,000 and it's impactful, that that's the goal. That doesn't always happen, but off the top of my head, I'd say like if I had like a top 5, one was Eagles Ballroom with Five Finger Death Punch. I think that was like 4,500 people and it was sold out. So it's the top floor of the rave, and I was just like, there are so many people here. And the minute our intro started, they were into it. I was just like, wow, like holy, like everybody in the front knew the songs, and I was just like, I mean, obviously it's Five Fingers crowd, so not everybody knows us, but there was enough people for me to realize that like people here know who we are, and the rest of the crowd's pretty into it. Hey, there's two pits, So that show in 2013 was one. I mean, just playing Download Festival. I won't say that the show itself was like a great show, like for me, but just the fact that I was in England playing for like over 6,000 people at Download, I was just like, I'm in England. I flew to London, and then here I am. Yeah, and I'm in England playing a festival. It's like, wow, And then the other one I'd say was Rockin' the Range in 2014, because that was in Columbus, Ohio, and there were a lot of people that I knew a lot of friends from like high school and stuff that came up, and a lot of people knew that I'm from Ohio, so it was like just we go out there. We were on the Ernie Ball stage because the year before we were on the smaller Jaeger stage, and even then that Jaeger stage the year before, like we had the entire parking lot full and everyone was going off. But yeah, but when we did that Ernie Ball stage, 3 times the amount of people, and they knew who we were, and I was just like, home state, like let's go. So yeah, off the top of my head, I'd say those like the top 3, I think.
That's a good segue actually, because one of the things I want to talk about too, the idea of leaving Cincinnati, going to LA, and the idea of coming back to your home state and stuff like that, the relationship with people, from your hometown, your home state, and stuff like that. Was it like, did you notice a difference, or like, because there's always that idea that like they'll have to go do music and to come back with something that's successful. Mm-hmm. Like, did you feel any of that, or?
Like I'm trying to think how to describe it. Like, because I forget. Like, I guess I compartmentalize things for myself. So like, I just feel like I'm me, and I have my friends, and because most of my good friends that I have today are the ones that I had before I moved to California. So on that way, I feel like I never skipped a beat. Like it's still the same circle of friends, and living in similar neighborhoods and all that. I don't think about living in LA and touring. And then I meet somebody new, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I start saying stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, that's right. I did a bunch of other stuff, and I'm doing other things, like, so I don't really, it's like backwards. Like I don't think about my life as a musician, and then relate it to my normal life here. It's like when I'm here, I feel like I'm more normal life here, and all the other stuff I just forgot about, until I'm reminded. But I mean, in general, like, it's cool because like, I'm not to be egotistical, like, oh, I've done some really cool stuff and you're sitting here in Ohio. It's not like that. It's more just kind of like, I'm obviously proud of things that I've done, and when I meet new people, and they discover what I've done and things like that. It's not about, I guess, the glory of I'm so cool for doing it. It's more like I feel like a lot of time it kind of inspires people a little bit to like kind of go like, oh wow, it's possible, to do other things than this 9 to 5 that I've been doing here. Grew up here, school here, just have a job here. Like there's just there's whether it's a career or it's just on a vacation more often. There's things you can pursue, or even hobbies. You can pursue other things. So that's something that I kind of notice in my vibe of like dealing with people here, is that they get like, oh, it's so cool. I should something, and that's yeah, I think that's kind of like what I feel a lot of time.
It can be inspiring when you see people, pursuing things and chasing goals and stuff. But you probably expand a little bit on it. But the idea of like, the quote unquote, like, we're chasing our dreams and stuff like that, but we see a career path. Like we want it. We know that people can have careers in music or in film or whatever. And it's like, go meet people who are successful, go get some of these circles where you can see what's actually going on. So like, it's not as much of a dream as it is just doing the research, like the real world education of what we need to do to be successful. And then, so it's not like, you'd probably say that there is a risk, because there's a certain number of years that we probably need to dedicate to it, and finances and personal sacrifice that goes into it. But it's like any career where it's like, there's big risk, but there's big reward.
Yeah. Well, I said this to you before we started. It was like, and there's not, for the music industry, there's not an obvious input to output ratio. Like with most jobs, especially if you go to college and you get a degree and you intern at this company and then they hire you at the bottom, and that in 5 years you're going to have this position to make this salary. You just got to stick to it, not screw it up. In the music industry, it's not that transparent. It's timing and luck, but timing and luck don't matter unless you're ready for it. So you have to always be prepared for it. It's like even meeting the person you're going to end up marrying. You know, you can sit there and say to yourself, "Oh, I wish you'd get married someday," but if you're not putting your best foot forward and presenting yourself and what you're doing the best way, when you meet that person, you might not even realize that you met them, and they might not even pay attention to you. You know, like you have to still be taking care of yourself and be just aware of that entire process of all that, of those things. You know.
Well, that idea of luck, because we did discuss that briefly at the beginning, and
the luck's only as good as you're ready to use it. You know, again, you could have had 10 lucky things happen, but you didn't realize it because you aren't aware of it, because you're not there in the headspace yet, or you weren't even ready to utilize it. So it didn't matter.
Yeah, you might.
Yeah, yeah. So you just weren't able to acknowledge that you had some luck. These other people that you're pointing at and making examples of, oh, they're so lucky. Well, they're probably putting their best foot forward, and between where their heads are at with what's going on and where they're physically at with how they're doing things and the process of their career, their job, whatever, opportunity came up, they were able to expound off of it and use it and utilize it. You know.
Yeah, and the thing too, we were chatting about before, it's like when someone comments like, oh, they got lucky, you don't know how many times they weren't lucky. Because there's so many times that you think everything's going to come together, or like this is a great opportunity, and it just kind of fizzles, and you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
You know, and then we were chatting before too, and one of my things, like I feel for a band or an artist that was ready to break at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that have to line up, and they could have spent the whole 2019 getting things ready to go, and we're going to put a single out at the end of 2019, and we're going to get some touring going, and you know, there's a big plan there, and it just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it feel for when people are like, oh, they got really lucky. It's like there's a lot of things that go into something being successful tonight, and I don't think it happens by accident. There are happy accidents, don't get me wrong, but it's like for the most part.
Well, I think it's funny. I think it's a general human trait to oversimplify things, even though it is completely obvious that nothing is simple. Look at politics. Look at religion. Look at all these things. You know, everyone arguing about COVID. Like, you're going to sum it up as this or that. It is not that simple. None of it's that simple. So why are we arguing, holding to these very polar, simplistic right or wrongs? You know, and that's how it goes with all that stuff too. You know, it's just like, if someone was like, "Hey, we want you to come to the school and tell everyone how to have a successful music career," come on.
It's one of those things. Like part of it, in my opinion, it'd be like, no, I don't want to, and part of me is like, how much time do I actually have to talk about all the things? Because
it's also, I feel like it's at that point it becomes like they had those old books where you could choose the next part of the book.
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah. It's like you can either go into the cave, or go up in the water, and then go to page 5. If it's, you know, that's what it kind of turns into if you're going to go down the rabbit hole of trying to talk about this stuff. Is like, all right, well, I can tell you what I did based off of who I am and circumstances and all that, and that it worked this way. But it's like, for me to accomplish what I've accomplished over the past decade, to have done that in Cincinnati versus me moving to LA, it's two completely different versions, and I'm still the same person. You know, so there's no way to sum it up. So it becomes, all right, well, you tell me this, and I'll tell you based off of what I know up to this point. And then when I get to that point, I'm going to ask you a question, and then you got to tell me. You know, and it's I'm saying, and that's the only way to kind of try to explain it, and that's not even going to explain it. That's just going to be more realistic to, you know, to a person's question of how can I be successful.
So that's your advice for someone starting today.
What?
Just the idea of just like there's a lot of I'm trying to think of a way to word it now. There's a lot of kind of goalposts when you get there, you're just like you're just like, okay, well then you have to make a decision here once you get here, and then you got to kind of live with these decisions.
Everything's relative. There's no black and white way to say. And like I said before too, it's just simple self-realization. You know, be realistic and again, it's hard for us to be realistic, especially about ourselves. But be realistic. If you're good at something, good. If you're great at something, good. If you're horrible at something, embrace that. And and operate accordingly. Whatever you're not good at, find the people that are better than you, and that as a team you can work off of each other. But don't get hard on yourself because you're not great at everything, or because you're not great at what you wish you were great at. Just realize that there's like some people like, I wish that I could play an instrument, but they're a ridiculously good cartoonist or something. Well, I wish I could draw, but I can't draw. I can play guitar. So it's like, just appreciate what you got, and then fill in the blanks.
See, one of the conversations today, we're talking about with musicians and chemistry, and how important like chemistry is as an individual is to success. And the idea where like there's tons of drummers, bass players, guitar players, keyboard, but it's like if you've got to choose between two, it's like you go with the one that you think you're going to vibe with better. And probably gonna get in trouble for some people for saying this, but it's just like the idea of there's a certain point where it kind of doesn't matter how good you are anymore, because if you don't have the personality, that chemistry to go along with it, you're not going to get those gigs. You're not going to find people to play with, sort of thing. So like it's driven me nuts a little bit the last year with people. Well, this kind of goes off a little bit of a tangent, but people that just kept practicing and practicing and practicing over the time that they've been off the road and stuff. And I'm like, learn other skill sets. Like you're talking about, you wanting to draw and be a cartoonist and stuff like that. Well, if that's what you want to do, it's like build that skill set as well. Like branch out, like go do some other things and learn a bit more. But it kind of go full circle. And you're talking about, just having that one skill set as a musician these days. It's like, you had a year off, and you could have done video. You could have figured out the lighting rig. Like you could have figured out some graphics stuff. There's all these things that could have added to the musician. Cause like at a certain point you can either play the songs or you can't, sort of thing. So,
if you're writing your own stuff, you only have to be as good as you are.
Yeah.
You're not the cover band trying to cover. You're not on a cover band trying to do Periphery, like, I mean, because picking up other skills is so much more important. It's like running faster. Like if you're already an Olympic gold medalist, you could train more and shave off a couple more tenths off your thing, but it doesn't really matter because you're still winning at that thing that you were doing already. So why not do some other things that could enhance the overall experience? Like someone like Michael Jordan. Yeah, he was a great basketball player, but then he started branding himself and put attention to having shoes and companies and things. He didn't just focus on being an even better basketball player. He already,
Yeah, there's branding that went along with that. The analogy that we're kind of chatting about today was the idea of like speed limits. It's like, someone's got the Ford Focus, someone's got the Lambo. The problem is I don't know what the equivalent would be, but here it's like if the city streets is 40 kilometers an hour, it's like they're both equal, all things considered at that point. You know, so it's one of those things where like when you're talking about learning your own songs, it's like that's kind of the speed limit. So it's like either you can play your own songs or you can't. And at that point, like start branching out. Like I understand people just really want to keep focusing on their musicianship, like that's a personal thing. But again, to be successful these days, and you're proof of it. It's just like being able to branch out to these other skill sets to bring those into the equation. Whether you have a crew or not, it's like it's important to know these things. And with the internet these days too, it's like with YouTube and just Google search, just a basic Google search to how to answer some of these questions, or or even just reaching out to people, finding out how they did things. It's like it's all at your fingertips. When people people have too many wrong questions, I'm like, I don't think you're trying hard enough.
Yeah, well, and also, and that's talking about things directly, even indirectly. There are other things that you can do in your life that aren't even directly for learning how to make your career better, but just for you as a human being, as a person, could put your take away certain stresses or make you be a little more enlightened about certain things, which then changes your mindset or your vibe for then running your band or being in your band or running your business, stuff like that. It's like everything is is related to each other, So this was, you don't necessarily have to. I mean, you should learn other things to run your band, but there's other things you work on for just your life, and then it frees you up to fully embrace and take advantage of all the stuff you're doing with your band. Or positive progress. That's it.
Well, I think that's a segue to kind of the last thing too, to kind of bring it full circle. The idea of last year bands being off the road, because you've been going hard probably the better part of a decade with the bands and touring and just making things work. And it's like, I imagine mentally the last year, once you realize that some of the stresses of being in a band that's on tour, like the idea where you can kind of look around and reevaluate things and kind of figure out, your priorities and stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I made a post about it. I think in like April or May, I simply just said, I know everyone's complaining they can't go on tour, but honestly, I'm okay with it. Like this was a way for me to, because for me it was always about being responsible for what I was doing because it's my job, And even though I was getting tired or I was getting burned out or whatever, I was like, but I got to make it work. You don't just quit your job or you don't just take a week off and leave everyone hanging. But I wasn't sure how long I could keep it up because it's just the 2 weeks that we did in February, I was like so tired physically and just mentally with stuff. But I realized with COVID not having to tour and stuff, I was just like, wow, fate stepped in and gave me a break without screwing up, what we've been doing, and I just tried to look at that from that perspective and embrace it. I know it's not perfect, and there's a lot of people that probably can't agree with my sentiment, but because their lives might have gotten screwed up with COVID and all that, but it's just perspective, and that's the perspective I tried to take on it, and 2020 for me in a lot of ways, especially if you ask my friends here locally at home, was all about me going like, do I really want to keep doing music? Should I do something else and just being a little more normal and localized? And I was leaning towards that through 2020. And then as soon as we hit 2021 and there's the idea of touring and everything, I was kind of like detoxed enough from all that like now I'm kind of excited to do certain things, and now I feel like I need to like follow up on things that I didn't follow up on before, and that people have asked me. For example, like I've had different bands talk to me about writing with me or recording with me, and I was always just like, I do too many things for this. There's no way I could dedicate any time, or I'm only so good at this. I couldn't justify doing it like this. And I kind of realized, well, again, it's a team effort with certain things. I work with other people. There's still other ways to do it beyond the way that I'm thinking initially. So I've gotten kind of excited about that kind of stuff. So, which this segues me into my pitch now of, years ago when I left Gemini Syndrome, Haj, the singer of Raw, who was our producer for a lot of stuff and co-writer, he told me, he's like, if you ever want to work with other bands and help develop other bands and stuff, he's like, I know you're not really an engineer and you don't have all the stuff, you don't have that history with it, but you know this, that, blah, 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 and people. So he's like, you should offer to work with other bands and things like that. I never took him up on it, but I hit him up a few weeks ago. I asked him, I was like, do you still want to try to do something like that? I mean, he's obviously busy on his own with his band and writing and producing on his own. He doesn't need me, to bring him people to work with. But I asked him, I was like, if I put out the vibe that I'm open to working with people on stuff and then they'd work with both of us, would you still want to partner up and do things like that? He's like, yeah, of course. So I haven't officially announced it. I guess this is the closest thing to me
There
officially
you
announcing
go.
it.
Breaking news.
There you go. But yeah, but yeah, I'm gonna start focusing some of my time on doing that and coordinating that. So when I have bands telling me like, yeah, it'll be so cool to write a track with you, or have you produce our album, or something, I actually could have the facilities physically and just personnel wise to like help people with that. Um, so that's a part of my realizations from detoxing from 2020 in the music industry for almost a year, was it's like, it's good that I'm focused on the band that I'm in, and I'm not going to stop being focused on it, but there's a lot more I can contribute to other people, to help them, whether it's writing, recording, helping with production, just general career mentoring, things like that. Like, like I think like the ultimate is like between all of Sahaj's experience and my own, if a band came and wanted to do like 3 songs with us, while they're there, they're going to be able to pick our brains.
Yes.
The entire time, so why wouldn't you, beyond the literalness of getting a better recording and better written songs, actually speak to people that
are doing it.
Yeah.
You've done it.
Yeah. And can tell you the pitfalls and the rights and the wrongs and all those things, like that stuff's invaluable, because it's not as simple as how good your recording is and how good your songs are. It's the whole package of everything put together, which that goes full circle to everything we've been saying. It's about all of it, and bringing all the pieces together, not just being the best player and then neglecting to realize all these other things, like not being a douchebag on a big tour.
Back with we can do a whole nother hour on some tour stories that way. But I think it's awesome to hear, getting more in production, but also I feel like it can scratch an itch as far as like, cause there's something very rewarding when you help another band kind of make their song or their idea, make it better, make it more commercially viable, like just make it a better idea of what they're after. And I think it's nice being able to kind of step outside of your band. I did the opposite. I got more invested in some of the projects that I was playing in, but it's like when you're able to kind of see it, from that perspective, and be able to help the bands that way, I think it helps a lot. Just kind of change how you're approaching stuff, because when you're in it, it's different when you're working with your own music, but when you're working with people's music, it's that muscle gets worked out a lot. So I think that's awesome. And thank you for the breaking news on the podcast, so you're getting more production. But I would add to the last year with especially with where we are in Toronto, like with distancing and lockdowns and stuff like that, it's forced bands and artists to start doing more home recording and encouraging them, like, no, we can do this. Like we have the gear, the technology, like to learn this stuff. So I think it's awesome. Like, I know you do have a background in production, but it's just like when you're busy with the band, you don't have time to do that. But just the idea of like, again, just being able to scratch that itch and go in and work with some bands. I think that's excellent to hear.
Yeah.
And the thing too, I think more and more bands in the future, and I think this has sped up the process, more and more bands are going to have in-house production, because it's going to keep costs down, but also it's going to allow them to work at their own pace instead of having to book time and then figure stuff out that way a little bit. It's like some of the things that they're doing, they'll be able to get better demos together, or maybe just get them mixed, or be able to, work remotely. Like a band can just call you and then be like, hey, let's do pre-production on this. Or like, hey, let's work on a Pro Tools session in the cloud and kind of go from there. Like, I think it's awesome. Just some of the upsides, as much as there's been some massive downsides the last year, there's been some upsides that are going to just, the people who are going to win, they're going to get that much further ahead. And the people that are hanging on to an old model, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
I think I'm going to ask you back for a part 2 on some of this stuff. Especially
once you get me started, I tend to ramble.
I know, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, we're an hour and 40 in, and it's like we can easily go 2.5 hours in here, especially catching up with certain things. But I think this is probably a good place to wrap things up. Is there anything else you want to add or mention before we sign off?
like I said, Emily's going to be here. We're shooting a video. We basically, I've said this in different versions, but I'll say it again because obviously the story evolves. We have a full album pretty much done. We're just waiting on final mixes. That's what, we released Wake the Dead in December, Kill This Love in February. The next song that we're going to release is called Falling Awake. I know for a fact the song after that's going to be dirty. So as I'm saying, we have all this material, and it's just been about getting everything together. And now that the world's kind of changing, going a little bit back to the normal, we can start speeding up, getting things out to people. So everyone has an album's worth of material to look forward to from September Mourning, and we're going to get ahead of ourselves, and we're going to put together some more. So when she's here in May, we're already going to start writing for the next batch of stuff. So there's a lot to look forward to, and then I just realized some stuff I probably shouldn't mention yet. I'll just keep in the edge of your seat. Yeah.
Well, we can figure it out if we need anything out, but it sounds awesome. And again, I love hearing your story, because again, I know how many moving pieces are with you as a musician, as a creative, and with September Mourning in particular as well. Where can everybody find you?
Facebook.com/ Rich Juzwick. No. Obviously all the September Mourning stuff is pretty typical. SeptemberMourning.com. Every link to every social is on there. And then for me, it's my name. You can find me directly if you want to work with me on stuff. If you want to see the other stuff I'm working on. I used to cook a lot before I was working a lot, so everyone was talked about food with me. This is something that I intended to start during COVID, and then I got too busy with the day job. I was going to start a Korean barbecue business.
Really?
So I started focusing on the recipes, and I was making Korean barbecue between the meat marinades and the veggies. And I started making my own kimchi. I even have the name for it. I have the website for it all. I literally just haven't had time to finalize everything. So if you want to find out about that stuff, then I'll, when I find time, I'll start making some more Korean food, and because there's not a lot of good Korean food in Cincinnati. So, and I'm part Korean, so it's authentic.
Sometimes we find our niches. We find the voids, and we're just like, this is what we're gonna do. So follow me for more recipes. That's what it comes down to. I want to say thanks to everybody for joining the chat today. We'll go through any questions we didn't get to. As far as where to find Rich, I'll put the details to that, if you're watching the replay on YouTube, in the description below. I just wanted one comment here. Leanne was saying, does Rich have a background in philosophy? I'm getting a philosophy vibe.
I have my own philosophy. I for whatever reason, I talk the way that I talk, and I don't know why I do. It's just a lot of stuff that I kind of thought, and if I sound smarter than I am, I appreciate that. If it sounds like I have a philosophy degree, thank you. But I have no background in philosophy, except that I just think too much.
It's a school of life, and there's a lot of time to think when you're on the road. Yeah, there's a lot of time where you're thinking about stuff, and you're just trying to make sense of certain things. So, but I would agree. You've got very, very good views and opinions on things, and again, it's good for you. I appreciate you sharing your perspective on some of these things, especially for other musicians and artists that may be listening in, and the fans too. Just the reality of certain things when we're musicians. So,
well,
all right.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me philosophize for everyone.
Until part 2. All right. Once again, my name is Mike Langford. This has been DearBands Live. And again, thanks again to our guest tonight, songwriter, guitarist. I was going to say again, I wanted to talk about
philosopher,
and my favorite.
Wait, one last thing.
What was it?
May is, I guess. Hold on, I got to put my phone real quick so I say that's the right way.
We got time.
May is officially Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And here
So
we
you're
are in
kicking
May.
off. You're kicking off Asian Pacific Heritage Month on Dear Bands
Yep.
Live.
Finally, a month for me. Well, half of me. 'Cause I'm only half Asian, but
Well, I had my half a month in February, so. But anyways, I think that is our time for tonight. Thanks again, Rich, for joining me.
Happy Asia Pacific Heritage Month, everyone! Come celebrate with me.
Sounds good. We'll go celebrate on Rich's Facebook page in a bit
Woo!
for the entire month of May. All right, that is our time for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Why?